He glanced toward the critically ill section, wondering how someone could have escaped such a heavily secured area. Memories of his own time in that section, when he couldn't distinguish reality from hallucination, came flooding back. They weren't pleasant. Yet, realizing the growing chaos, he advised the woman to leave for her safety and call him later. She agreed, reminding him of his promise before walking toward the hospital's exit. Left alone, he returned to his ward, thinking about the jade pendant's value and the mysteries surrounding its origin. Whether it was from a hallucination or reality no longer seemed to matter. Its worth was undeniable. As the man walked back toward his ward, he suddenly heard a cry from behind. Turning quickly, he saw an older man, bald and frail-looking, pushing the woman to the ground. Anger surged through him, and without hesitation, he charged toward them, shouting for the older man to let her go. Before he could reach them, a brick came flying through the air, striking him hard on the head. The force of the hit made his vision blur, and he fell to the ground as blood began to flow from the wound on his head. Through his reddened and blurred vision, he saw the older man's bloated feet moving toward the woman, who was now screaming and struggling on the ground. Fear and desperation filled his mind. He knew he couldn't let her get hurt. With shaky hands, he reached into his pocket and pulled out one of the pills given to him by the mysterious figure he trusted. He swallowed it, mixing it with the blood from his head wound. Almost immediately, a burning energy surged through his body, spreading to his arms and legs. His thoughts cleared and strength returned to him. He stood up and landed a powerful punch on the larger man's chin, sending some of his teeth flying. The larger man fell to the ground, stunned. Ignoring his own injuries and the blood dripping down his face, the man didn't stop. He turned toward the older man who had attacked the woman and stomped on his chest with full force. The sound of breaking bones echoed loudly as the older man coughed up blood, unable to resist. The sight of the woman sobbing on the ground, clutching her torn sweater, fueled the man's rage. His eyes were bloodshot, and his teeth clenched so hard that his gums began to bleed. With unrelenting fury, he leapt toward the two attackers like a wild animal. Just as he was about to strike again, a voice shouted, "Stop! What are you doing?" The plea broke through the chaos, momentarily halting his actions as his trembling body and intense gaze locked on the scene before him. The man lay on the hospital bed, restrained by a straitjacket, his eyes fixed on the intravenous drip above him. He seemed lost in thought, waiting for something to happen. The stillness of the room was broken by the sound of the door creaking open. A familiar voice called out, "Hey, weren't you recovering well before? What happened all of a sudden?" It was his attending doctor, who walked in with a look of disappointment. Hearing the doctor's words, the man, whose head was wrapped in bandages, quickly tried to explain. He spoke anxiously, defending his actions. "Doctor, they attacked her first. I had no choice but to protect her." The doctor adjusted his glasses, looking unconvinced. "You call that protecting her? That was more like trying to kill someone. One of them is still in the ICU because of you. Your kick nearly ended his life. You've been here long enough to understand the situation of others in this place. Did you even think about their mental state before acting? I thought you were more sensible." The man clenched his fists, thinking about the frightened woman he had tried to protect. He stood firm in his response. "So what if they're mentally ill? Does that mean they can do whatever they want? If it's a choice between letting her get hurt or going to prison, I'll choose prison without a second thought." The doctor sighed heavily, seemingly unable to argue further. "Forget it. The hospital director has already contacted the families involved. You don't need to worry about this anymore." Hearing this, the man turned away, curling up on the bed to face the wall. His mind raced with thoughts, wondering if the jade pendant he possessed, worth a significant sum, would be enough to resolve the situation. Despite the uncertainty, he found a strange sense of confidence knowing the pills he had taken earlier were effective. It felt like new possibilities were opening up for him. The doctor, noticing his low spirits, tried to reassure him. "Don't worry, you won't go to jail. The hospital can issue a certificate to back you up. Focus on recovering and let us handle the rest." The man felt a hint of warmth in the doctor's words and replied softly, "Thank you." The doctor patted his shoulder, speaking kindly. "There's no need to thank me. It's my duty to look after you, especially since you're so young. But let me ask you something. How did you manage to injure them so severely? That's not something an average person could do. Were you in a normal state, or was it a result of stress or hallucination?" The man's heart raced at the question, and his thoughts immediately turned to the pills hidden in his pocket. Trying to stay calm, he replied, "That was all me." The doctor's tone grew serious, though it remained friendly. "Think carefully before you answer. Don't try to hide anything from me. I've seen this before, and I don't like it when patients deceive me." The atmosphere in the room grew heavy as the man struggled to find a way to deflect suspicion. Suddenly, his surroundings began to blur, and the doctor's voice faded into a distant hum. Within moments, he found himself in a completely different place. A solitary cave with simple furnishings. He was lying on a stone bed. Sitting up, he surveyed the room and let out a quiet chuckle. Despite everything, he thought to himself, at least this was another way out. The man sat quietly, contemplating his next steps. He didn't plan to return to the hospital so soon, especially if the doctor was waiting for him. Instead, he ventured out of his room, observing the other disciples moving through the cave's corridors. His thoughts turned to his newfound knowledge of the pill's effectiveness. He resolved to be more cautious and take full advantage of his position in this place. His status had recently shifted. No longer just an ingredient worker in the preparation room, he was now recognized as one of the bald man's official disciples. This change granted him more freedom to move and act. While walking, he spotted a bearded man in Taoist robes passing by. His eyes lit up and he quickly approached, calling out, "Senior, senior!" The bearded man turned, acknowledging him indifferently. "What is it?" he asked. The man adopted a respectful tone, saying, "I've recently been accepted as a disciple and was hoping for your guidance. What should I do next?" The senior disciple glanced at him and spoke bluntly. "Even though the master accepted you, your rank is the lowest. For now, your duties are limited to errands around the temple. Only the inner circle disciples are allowed to learn the cultivation of immortality from the master. You're far from qualified for that. Follow me and wait outside the pill room." The mention of immortality caught the man's attention. He muttered to himself, "Immortality? Using humans to make pills doesn't sound like any path to becoming immortal." Doubts lingered in his mind, but the senior disciple spoke with pride. "Of course the master can become immortal. He even has supernatural powers. All you need to do is serve him well." Through this conversation, the man gained a better understanding of the temple's structure. There were 5 official disciples, 1 personal disciple, and the master, who led them all. Beyond this core group, the rest were workers, cooks, ingredient gatherers, and general assistants. In total, there were around 180 people, though the numbers had dwindled after the last batch of disciples perished. As they talked, the pill furnace came into view, radiating a heavy, oppressive aura. White smoke wafted gently from it, signaling that something was being refined. The master stood nearby, accompanied by his inner circle disciple, who wore a grim expression. After some waiting, the man was assigned his first task, retrieving and organizing ingredients in the preparation room. Upon entering the room, he noticed the white dust coating every surface and the nervous stares of the workers inside. Their fear was evident, and it was clear that his new status had changed their perception of him. Among the workers, a young girl with albinism hesitated for a moment, stepping forward as if to speak. However, she stopped herself and retreated silently. It was clear to the man that he was no longer seen as a fellow worker, but as someone with authority over them. Realizing the shift in dynamics, he saw an opportunity. "Do any of you have money?" he asked bluntly. His question startled the group. Seeing their confusion, he clarified, "Silver, gold, or jade will work too." The man's sudden request for money stemmed from practical needs. Back in his original reality, he faced potential compensation demands for a serious incident. and his family's modest background couldn't easily cover such costs. His concern for his mother's well-being drove him to seek funds however he could. He continued, "If you can't use it here, hand it over to me as a protection fee. I'll ensure no one troubles you." The workers understood his words and, without protest, began handing over their belongings. A few offered small, worn items, a blackened piece of silver, a copper hairpin, and around 40 copper coins. As he examined the meager collection, he sighed. The value of these items was far less than he had hoped. Inwardly, he realized that even his medical insurance back in the real world might be worth more than this pitiful haul. The scene begins with a young woman nervously removing her shoe to reveal a golden anklet tied with red thread around her pale ankle. A man, who appeared to be in charge, took the anklet, weighing it in his hand. Though it felt light, the gold's worth seemed significant to him. He tucked it into his wide sleeves and addressed the group, assigning the woman with albinism to lead the preparation room. The others hesitantly agreed, and the man left with the collected ingredients, hurrying to another room. As he walked, his eyes darted to others, searching for more valuables, but found none. Upon entering the furnace room, he saw a large pill furnace being opened. Another man, seemingly skilled in supernatural abilities, carefully placed blue pills into a gourd on his waist. Watching this, the first man was filled with envy and ambition, wondering how he could acquire such powers. He dreamed of using these abilities in his own world, seeing them as more valuable than material wealth. Interrupting his thoughts, he was given a task: fetch an ingredient called Bai Ling Miao from the preparation room. This name triggered a wave of internal conflict. The young woman he had just placed in charge matched the description, and he suspected that delivering her might lead to her death. Torn between his orders and his conscience, he hesitated. The other man's tone grew harsher, prompting a reluctant sigh from him. His surroundings suddenly shifted, and he found himself back in a hospital ward, bound to a bed. Dreamed by nurses, he paced nervously in his room, grappling with his dilemma. Before he could decide, his doctor entered, mentioning visitors. His weary mother soon arrived, carrying fruits. Her worry over his condition brought a mix of comfort and guilt. He reassured her that he was fine, carefully avoiding any mention of the turmoil he faced in the other world. Her anger over a hospital incident, combined with her protective nature, offered him a brief escape from his struggles.